A very, very warm welcome to Cialfo and to the Cialfo Learning Series. Today, we're going to be talking about subject selection and what are the mistakes that you shouldn't be making when you are looking at this important choice of yours. What grades are you all from, Tatiana, Vidhi, and Arshia? Do share it in the chat box. We'll go ahead, right? So I'm going to take you through different steps in terms of what you need to avoid and the mistakes you need to make sure you don't make. Now, the first thing in all of that is really not understanding the career landscape. And what does this really mean, right? The world of careers, as we know it, has tremendous opportunities in today's day and age, right? There's someone like a machine risk officer. There's someone called a data detective. There are flying car developers, vertical landscape designers, haptic and neural interface designers, right? The endless opportunities are available in this whole thing. And all of this really starts at that point where you are going to be choosing the right subjects, which will take you onto the path to these future careers, right? So there are a few things which you really need to keep in mind as you begin to make this decision. And the first thing is understanding how the world of work works today. Now, we live in an age where we have something called the gig economy. Now, the gig economy, or a gigger as they're normally called, is something on the lines of a freelancer, but it's different too, and I'll tell you how. Now, a freelancer normally shares one particular skill with multiple service providers. For example, maybe you have a skill of writing, then maybe you could be writing for a magazine, maybe you could be writing for a newspaper, maybe you could be writing a blog, correct? So it's the same skill that you're looking to share with multiple service providers. But when you're a gigger, it means that you have multiple skills, correct? You could be someone who's interested in programming. Maybe you're a part-time coder, right? Maybe you're someone who's interested in photography, and maybe you look at part-time photography or looking at work in that area. Or maybe you're also interested in looking at, say, designing things, right? So then maybe you can do some creative output too. So for a gigger, it is not limited to one career. Now, in the past, careers began and ended in the same domain, right? Today, the opportunities are really endless. So each and every individual can actually work in different domains and really explore that further. The second thing that we look at is techno-dexterous. Now, does anyone know what the word dexterous means? Has anyone heard of the word ambidextrous? Do you know what ambidextrous is? Right? Ambidextrous is someone who can actually write with both their hands, okay? Someone who can write with their right hand and with their left hand as well. So what is techno-dexterous then? Now, the meaning of techno-dexterous in today's world of work is essentially that every single person has to understand technology. It does not matter if you are from a completely disconnected field, right? It's not just that programmers and coders and software engineers need to understand technology. Let's take an instance of a doctor. Now, a doctor, if you're looking at studying medicine, is completely removed from the world of technology in that sense of it, right? But going to the future, there are going to be robots which are performing surgeries, right? So the whole involvement of technology has become very, very crucial in whichever domain you're looking at, right? So that becomes an important thing to consider. And the next thing is multiple roles. Now, what do I mean by multiple roles? Can anyone tell me what this is? Just type it quickly into the chat box. Can you tell me what this image is over here? Does anyone know what this image is? A landline phone. Perfect. Okay. Now, in the past, a phone was essentially used to make a call or to receive a call, correct? And that was the entire use of a phone. What are phones used for nowadays? Can anyone tell me quickly? What are phones used for nowadays? Texting, great, Vidhi. What else? Social media. Taking pictures, Rachel, superb. Meets, Arshia. Exactly, right? So phones, songs. right? Phones nowadays have multiple roles coming into it, right? It's a step counter, it's a calculator, it's a flashlight, it's social media, it's texting, it's a whole bunch of varied things, right? So just like the role of that simple phone has changed from a single functionality to multiple functionality, it is the same instance in the world of work, right? An individual is expected to look at doing multiple things, right? So it becomes very important, students, for y'all when you're making subject choices, not to be limited only by your area of interest. Now, what I mean by this is maybe you have a strong inclination towards science, so do go ahead and pick your science related subjects. But also, if you have the opportunity, try and explore a different area too, right? Because the broader you're able to expand your horizons, the farther it's going to take you going ahead. All right. So that was the first point of what you need to look at doing. Now, the second thing, or the second mistake you shouldn't be making, is dropping a subject without mapping its future prospects. Okay. Now, I don't know why this happens, but when any student talks about dropping a subject, the most common subject that students end up wanting to drop is math. Okay, I don't know if there's like a universal hatred towards math, or everyone finds math very difficult, but that ends up being something that is top on the list of subjects that students want to end up dropping. Okay, but how do you really make that choice, right? There are some things you need to look at considering. One, of course, is your interest towards it. Two is the future potential. And three is going into the syllabus and understanding what is really going to be covered in that particular subject going ahead, right? So as we were talking about math, now initially and usually what ends up happening is when a student say, you know the association that you need to look at math if you're looking at engineering. And if a student is thinking that, oh, you know what, I don't want to become an engineer, so I really don't see the reason why I need to keep math in my mix, correct? So engineering is definitely one of the career options. But what are the other areas that math is required in? If you're looking at physical sciences, pure sciences, computer applications, architecture, finance and banking, becoming a pilot, joining the merchant navy, defense forces. So while there is a certain component of an engineering which requires math, there are numerous other courses that also require a base in math, correct? So before you go ahead and drop a subject, spend some time thinking about which are all the other avenues where math is required, right? Similarly, let's just take, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick some general subjects just to give you an idea of how your thinking process has to really work on this, okay? So we're looking at, say, a subject like economics. You need to go into it a little deeper and understand what are some of the things that you're going to be learning in this subject, right? Like we called it at the beginning, the syllabus, correct? The basic problems that an economy faces, different kinds of economy, right? If we're looking at macroeconomics, microeconomics, and then understanding what is your potential interest in it, correct? So one is some area where it is remotely interesting to you. Two is looking at the syllabus so you understand a little more in depth what is really going to be covered. And three, then mapping it to the potential career avenues that are going to be coming up from this space. All right. So let's take another example that was related to economics. Let's say business studies, correct? Here you're going to be talking about proprietorship, understanding accounting, public sector enterprises. So if business and commerce is something that has some interest for you, then you need to be looking at a combination or including subjects related to this to take you towards careers related in chartered accountancy, marketing and advertising, business and finance, auditing, tax, capital markets, etc. Right? Biology. Now, again, common association. I don't want to do medicine, so I don't need to do bio, right? But bio also opens numerous other avenues, right? Dentistry, veterinary sciences, biochemistry, botany, paramedical science, biotechnology, bioinformatics, right? So guys, always when you are looking at that subject choice, you need to not just look at it from today, right? Am I scoring well in this subject? Is this subject interesting? Great. That is the perfect starting point for you to consider keeping this subject in your mix. But you also have to take a jump a few steps ahead and figure out where you can really take this subject with you. All right. Similarly, computer science, a whole bunch of areas that we hear about commonly: artificial intelligence, machine learning, data science. All of this has a base in computer science, correct? So like we spoke about earlier, when we said techno-dexterous, we also understand that a component of being technical, like literate, technology literate, is very important in today's day and age, true? So even if you're looking at something completely different, like I said, like bio or design or something else, if you have the opportunity to bring in a subject which has a technology base, go ahead and study that, as it's going to really open up your horizons for you, right? Now, I'm going to ask you a few set of questions. Rachel, I'm going to jump to the questions at the end. So I've just noted your question on paramedical science. We'll come back to that later. Okay, quickly. Now, if a student is interested in physics and interested in music, what could be the potential career avenues for the student? Does anyone have an idea? If a student is interested in physics and in music, what could be the potential career avenue that they could be looking at? Some physics and music. Any ideas? Manufacturing instruments, Rachel, superb. All right. Right. You could also be looking at sound engineering, right? So there are various, so when you have different interests in subjects, you can combine it in different ways, okay? But in order to become a sound engineer, do you think that the student has to pick physics as a subject and pick music as a subject? No, not necessarily, correct? Because in this case, the basis of the course is engineering, which means they need physics. Music can be an interest for them, but it doesn't have to be a mandatory subject, okay? What I'm trying to come to is understanding the difference between an interest and a subject that you need to pick when you're studying, all right? The next thing is sports and looking at reading. Now, what could be a potential avenue for someone who has an interest in sports and who is interested in reading? Can anyone type it in the chat box? What could be a potential avenue for sports and reading? Sports journalism, fantastic, right? You could be a sports journalist, you could be a sports analyst, correct? And again, in this scenario, do you need to be someone who is doing a bachelor's, for example, in sports psychology? No, right? Do you need to be someone who's doing a bachelor's related to writing? Maybe, correct? So you need to figure out where is the component of interest and where is the thing that becomes the basis for your education, all right? Someone who's interested in biology and design can then look at becoming something like a prosthetic designer, right? You're bringing in two different disciplines in this instance, and that is opening up a whole set of new avenues for you, all right? The next mistake the students end up making is settling. And what I mean by settling is once you have clarity in terms of what are the areas of interest and what are some of the subjects that you're interested in studying in, a lot of us kind of get stuck in a comfort zone, correct? So maybe when we look around, we are used to studying in whatever curriculum we're looking at, right? There are multiple curriculums available. There is the IB, the Cambridge, CBSE, CISE, other curriculums based on whichever part of the world you're coming in from. Correct? Now, each of these curriculums offer a different range of subjects, different subject groups that you can choose from, correct? So if the curriculum that you are studying in is not offering you the areas that you're interested in, it may be time for you to look at stepping out of your comfort zone and looking at another curriculum, correct? This is very important for you to look at doing because we're always so used to kind of working within that space that we're more comfortable in. So you have to first go ahead and look at, like we said, the area of interest. What are the future prospects in this particular area? And then look at if the curriculum that you're studying in allows this, right? So this sometimes becomes a great time for you to look at making that switch because you need to be able to explore. So grade 11 and grade 12 for most of y'all would be the time when you're going to be able to explore various subjects. Correct? But this also comes with a component of planning coming into it. Now, when you are looking at what subjects you're going to look at, often I have had students making a mistake of not checking the university requirements, okay? What do I mean by university requirements? Let's take the instance of psychology as a subject. Now, normally, psychology is grouped under humanities. So a student who is looking at studying psychology may presume that in grade 11 and 12, they need to look at a greater focus on humanities or pick those subjects, correct? But when you would actually go to a university, and I'm just taking the example of one university here, a student who is looking at doing a bachelor's in psychology from a university in Toronto actually sees that they require biology and math as compulsory subjects. Right? So imagine someone who's gone ahead and picked humanities in grade 11 and 12, thinking that that's the association with psychology. Now, there are courses available in different countries where you can use a humanities base and go ahead and study a bachelor's of psychology too. this is more oftenly a BA in psychology. But if you're looking at what we call a BSc in psychology, then you would definitely need to have bio and math as your subjects, right? So like I was saying, along with understanding what the subject is, you need to go and check what the university's requirements are for you to pursue that at the undergrad level. The next thing that we look at is really this concept or thought that universities end up picking students who have scored the highest marks. Okay. Now I'm just going to repeat that, right? Many students end up thinking that universities pick students who have scored the highest marks. Okay. Now I'm just going to take you through a scenario to explain this a little more further. Now, in this scenario, there is a computer science course available at a particular university, okay? And there's just one spot left for this particular course. And the IB requirement for the student to be able to get into this course is they require a 6 math HL, and then you also require the HL with 7, 7, and 6 scores. Okay. I know some of you may or may not be from an IB curriculum. I can explain this to you in further detail. But overall, for every course, there are standard entry requirements based on whichever curriculum you're coming from. I'm just taking one here as an example. Okay. So just quickly to recap, a student needs these scores to get into a computer science program at a particular university. All right. So I'm going to take the instance of 2 students. Rachel, she has a score of 41 and Ross has a score of 38. Okay. Now, anyone knows who Ross and Rachel are? Any references to which sitcom they're from? Friends, exactly. Super. All right. Right. So just looking at the scores, there is 1 seat left in the university. Do you think Ross is going to get in or Rachel's going to get in? Just type it into the chat box. Right? So there's 1 seat left at the university. Okay, Arshia saying Rachel, perfect. Vidhi is also saying Rachel, right? So our assumption, like we spoke about earlier, is that universities pick the students with the highest scores, okay? Now, what happens here is when you explore it a little bit more in detail, okay? I'm just going to take this in a little bit more deep because I think this is a very important thing for you all to look at. Ross has subjects such as math, computer science, and economics at a higher level, okay? Rachel has bio, business, and language at a higher level. And then Ross has language and bio and okay, at the standard level. And then similarly, you see what's here. Now, though Rachel has technically scored higher with an overall score of 41, for a computer science course, the requirement was actually, what did we see? They required to have math at a higher level with a minimum score of 6, right? Now, who has that? Who has math at a higher level with a minimum score of 6? Can you see from the sheet and tell me whether it's Ross or Rachel? Right? Super, right? So Ross is the one who has actually met the requirement, correct? Rachel has also math in her mix of subjects, but she has taken it at standard and she has not taken it at a higher level. And though her score is higher, she automatically gets disqualified from taking this. Okay. So guys, this becomes a very important aspect that we need to consider because it is not just sufficient that you have a particular subject. You always have to map it with the courses that you're potentially interested in. Okay, because that's where the whole process really begins, correct? It's about working backwards, correct? You have to first identify what your goal is and then figure out what are the steps in that requirement to take you to that particular goal, all right? So essentially, when you are looking at your subject choices, now for all of y'all, I'm just going to open up this question to y'all in the chat box. Have all of you today kind of decided what would be the subjects or streams that you're looking at for grade 11? Do go ahead and type it in the chat box. Tatiana, Rachel, and Arshia. Okay, so Tatiana and Rachel are saying yes. Super. Tatiana, do you mind going ahead and typing it into the chat box? What is it that you're looking at? Rachel, you too, if you'd like to. Okay, Tatiana's looking at computer science. Superb. And Rachel's looking at biochemistry. Great. And Arshia, you're also kind of debating. Do you have some choices that you're kind of debating between? Okay, great. So essentially what you're going to be doing is, now that you have effectively two different, Vidhi is saying not the streams, although somewhere in psychology. Super, Vidhi. Okay. And Arshia is saying biotechnology and computer science. Okay, fantastic. All right. So I'm just going to come into this. Now Vidhi, for you, when you're saying you haven't yet decided the streams, but somewhere in the domain of psychology, this is where we bring in another component of interest. Okay. And I'll tell you what that means. Now, let's presume psychology as a subject. So that is the domain, correct? Now, if you are someone who loves talking to people, right? Now, somebody who wants to look at becoming a psychologist has to be someone who is empathetic, who's a good listener, who has the patience to be able to talk to people. And ideally, we see these markers even in school. Like in your own friend circle, are you someone who people would want to come and talk to and share their problems with, right? If that's a component where it's more interesting for you, then you need to head more towards to becoming a counseling psychologist. Okay. The other angle for a psychology student is, imagine that you're fascinated by how the brain works, right? Human beings are such complex creatures. And whether you're looking at us feeling anger, jealousy, hunger, sadness, happiness, everything is literally a chemical reaction in our brain, right? So what is it? What are the triggers that really make us behave and respond the way we do? And this is where it forms the basis of neurosciences, right? So some people are really more interested in the study of the mind to understand why humans behave the way they do, correct? So if that is more of an interest for you, then Vidhi, then your inclination is more to a Bachelor of Science in psychology, thereby leading more towards, neurosciences, clinical psychology, that aspect of it. And if talking to people, being that support system, and being able to help people feel better is something that's more appealing, then you're heading towards a Bachelor of Arts in psychology with a more counseling focus, right? So I hope that kind of helped you with that. And Arshia, you're saying biotechnology and computer science, right? Super. So again, going back to the subject selection that we were talking about in the previous slides. Now, when you are at a stage, presumably in grade 10, when you haven't yet decided, the safest option becomes if you can keep all avenues open, which means you're able to kind of incorporate all of the subjects that are required to study both the courses. But in addition, I would really request you to start exploring this in a lot more detail, right? I'm going to jump back to the beginning of the slide, of the deck, where we were talking about different kinds of career avenues that are opening up, right? At this point of time, you need to explore. Now, I'm just going to give you a quick instance. With computer science, it's going to take you down a path where you're going to be heading in a direction that is more technology focused, right? And if you're looking at, say, something more on the biotechnology part, it'll take you more towards this angle, right? Haptic and neural interface design, in that angle, right? So you have to map your interest to specific careers and start understanding and researching those careers in a lot more detail, so that you'll be able to then see, okay, can I actually picture myself doing XYZ, correct? And that's when it helps you really find your answers and fine tune, because it becomes a little difficult sometimes, especially in grade 11 and 12. You also need to end up preparing for various entrance exams. And when you have too many options open, then you need to kind of spread your attention into preparing for different things, right? So thereby being able to focus on what it is that is really more interesting for you becomes a useful exercise. So use this time before you really get into grade 11 to be able to do that research and exploration, so you can kind of identify it narrower. Vidhi, you're looking at drama therapy. Fantastic. That sounds really interesting. Super. Okay, let me just jump back to the end. So like we were saying, guys, these are some of the key mistakes that you need to avoid when you're looking at subject choices. Now, like we said, y'all could have come in from various different curriculum, different subject combinations that you have. I'm not going into which subject in which curriculum, because that's like a different webinar in itself. But for today, the idea is really to map it as per what it is that we've discussed in today's session. Okay. Ayushi, can you please share the link in the chat box? And for those of you who are still pretty clueless about where you want to get started or where you want to head, we have a video on Ikigai. Has anyone heard of Ikigai, or has everyone heard of Ikigai? So this is basically a Japanese concept. Okay. Vidhi saying you have. Superb. All right. So this is the Japanese concept, which helps you discover your purpose in life, right? It's a series of questions and things for you to kind of introspect and think about, which will help you decide which would be an ideal direction for you to go in, right? It's basically helping you find your why, as it's called. So there is a link that we've shared in the chat box. This will lead you to the Discovery Center on the platform. Go ahead and watch this video. You have to basically create a grid with like 4 boxes in it and start jotting down your thoughts. And then it'll help you kind of articulate it a little better and give you some more clarity in terms of what is it that really drives you? What is it that really excites you? What is it that is going to make you want to wake up and go into work every single morning, right? And essentially, I think for all of us, we want to be able to make that difference in whichever area or domain or space we think of it, right? And being able to then find that why really helps with your decision in terms of what is then the career path that you want to pick. And like we said, once we have that destination or goal in mind, then we come down to what are the subjects we really need to choose to be able to get to that point. So that's about it, students, for today. Thank you so much for joining us. If you do have any questions, happy to take them now. Oh, by the way, this is a link to our Instagram page. You can also go ahead and follow us on Instagram. You will get constant updates on anything new that's happening. There's a whole bunch of resources and material that's also being shared. So do follow us on Instagram to kind of take this forward. I think there's a question. Give me a second. Why would psychology require bio and math? Yeah. So like we were talking about a BSc in psychology. Okay. Now, when you have a BSc in psychology, there are multiple universities abroad that require a basis of bio and math, right? There are different kinds of things. So if you're looking at analyzing how the mind works, correct? Of course, a huge component of bio comes in, but there is also a statistical analysis that you're putting together to understand how a particular population thinks. Why do teenagers respond the way they do, right? So that's why they have a component of both bio and math coming into this. But like I said, it is also possible to study psychology without bio and math. It really depends on which college, country, and course you end up applying to. All right, super. Thank you so much, everyone. I think we're already up on our time. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Have a great day. Bye-bye.